Are you thinking about hiring a property manager and you're wondering what you could expect in terms of fees? Oftentimes, many people don't realize that the property management company might charge owner paid fees, but they also might charge fees to your tenant. So it's important to know if those two things exist and what belongs under which, like who pays which fee. So obviously, you're going to want to make sure that you have an understanding of these fees. You've read through the contract, you've asked many questions, and we have other videos on property management questions that would be appropriate to ask. But once you sign on that dotted line and you're going to get started, usually what you have is an onboarding fee. And that fee is typically going to cover, let's say, getting you set up in the property manager's online profile, getting you set up so that you can be able to get paid or receive your rent each month, as well as for them to be able to collect money from your tenants and just getting all of your things in their system so they can do background checks on potential tenants, etc. That onboarding fee could also include if you have a current tenant in the property and you are working to get that tenant removed from the property. Now, if it's something legal, that might have other fees, but more so just transitioning from renter or tenant to the next and just getting that initial tenant out of the property that could include that in that fee as well. So it's something you just have to check with your property management company and see what theirs entails, but oftentimes there will be an onboarding fee. So let's say that tenant moves out and the property needs to get clean. Now you will have to confirm with the property manager that you choose exactly how they will handle any cleaning and those types of things in between before you get your first renter into the property. But oftentimes you will have a set amount or maintenance coordination fee, and we'll talk more about that later in this video. But for now, let's just assume that the property is vacant and it's already cleaned and ready to go. So what'll typically come up then is going to be another fee, which is going to be the tenant replacement fee or tenant placement fee. And oftentimes the range of the cost for that is about 50% to 100% of 1 month's worth of rent. So usually you are not keeping most of the rent that you receive for the first month because the property manager is essentially charging that fee to cover any advertising of the property. Maybe they did listings or they may have put signs up or they may have done other methods of marketing for you on your behalf. And so they want to be reimbursed for that service, obviously. But also they do background checks and credit checks and they have lists and they know where to go to find renters to be able to get them into your home and hopefully have a short vacancy period. So that tenant placement fee is often going to be 50 to 100% of whatever 1 month's worth of rent is. The fee that most people are familiar with when it comes to property managers is that ongoing maintenance fee. Typically, you see that fee at 8% to 10% of whatever the monthly rent is that you collect from your tenants. And that fee typically is covering any of the operational aspects of managing the property. So think core services like staying in communication with the tenant on your behalf, being the first line of contact so that you can free up your own time collecting rent, handling any concerns that the tenants might bring up. They might have maintenance requests. They just might have questions in general in terms of how to handle something or what to do or HOA follow up and those types of things. So they are going to be the main point of contact on your behalf and manage the day to day ins and outs of what managing the property entails. So if someone calls in the middle of the night and something's happened with their sink or something's happened with the toilet or a pipe is broken or anything like that, an emergency or just routine maintenance, your property manager is handling that for you. So that will be included in that ongoing monthly maintenance fee. Something else that people might not think about is the fact that they also oftentimes provide financial reporting. And that is excellent so that you can be able to stay on top of what repairs happen at which property, what were the dates? How much did it cost? So you'll be able to tally those things up. And those are often very important when it comes to tax filing time, but just also as you manage your property ongoing and see how much that property is actually costing you versus what you're bringing. Thinking about those fees, something that people might be a little bit surprised by is the fact that oftentimes property managers will charge a markup on maintenance requests and coordinating maintenance service. So they have to get with contractors, oversee any work, or not just contractors, but even just a licensed individual who came out and do some work on the property or any repairs. They're coordinating those things on your behalf. They're making sure that the work is done up to a good standard. It's quality work. and they might charge a fee on that. And oftentimes, what you'll see that range is about 10 to 15% of a markup on whatever the cost is for that particular repair or service. Now, some people will wonder, well, what happens when it comes to an emergency repair or something that's needed? Fee. Now, you'll have to check, obviously, with the property manager that you choose, but they may have it set up where they charge a fee no matter the emergency, or some might have it set up where they don't charge an emergency or a fee rather for emergencies that are under a specified dollar limit. So you really do want to check on that. And another good question would be whether or not they charge a fee for any emergencies that happen, what they consider after hours. For some, that might be 7, some might be 6, some might be 10 p.m. at night. You'll have to check with your particular property manager, but do they charge a fee for that? And who pays the fees? So right now we're talking about owner paid fees, but perhaps you want to negotiate with them because what if it's something like the tenant stuffed something down the sink and it was something that more so is on them for that? Do you get charged that fee versus maybe there's something that the property manager has been telling you about or something that you as an owner have neglected? And remember, we don't want to do that. This is your business, but something you as the owner have neglected and maybe there's an emergency due to your own negligence of not keeping the property up, then that fee might actually come to you. So that's important to be able to decipher and get in front of so you can understand who will actually get that fee if something like that does come up. So you're not surprised when it happens. Now, staying on top of the property and making sure that nothing's getting neglected shouldn't be that difficult because the property manager should also be doing their inspections as well. Typically, they'll include 2 inspections at least per year or per lease while it's rented out to a tenant. Now, that's something you want to double check, like how often do they inspect and what's actually included in your fee that you're paying them. Because beyond 2 inspections, you might have to pay more. You want to find out if that's true, how many is already included underneath, and if above that amount, how much do they charge per inspection that you need after that? Maybe something's going on at the property. You just need them to go over there and take another walk through the property and really see what's happening with it because you have some concerns or whatever have you. You just want to know ahead of time what that's going to cost. And that'll help you avoid things like any violations with regard to the HOA that your property manager might have to handle on your behalf. So if they have to communicate with the HOA and get that fixed out, there may be an additional fee for that. And I think really what that's coming back to, it can feel like nickel and diming a bit, but I think what that's coming back to is trying to make sure that you as the owner, you're staying on top of your property and what they might be suggesting to you so that it doesn't bring up unnecessary follow-up. So now I think something that's important there to note though is there's 2 sides to that. I believe again, the owner side and the tenant side. So for instance, if in your neighborhood where your property is located, putting the trash can by the edge of the road or just keeping garbage in a certain way by the edge of the road is just in violation, or the way that they keep the yard outside, the way they keep it up, if that's in violation. And somehow it's more so of something that falls on the tenant. So you do want to check with the property manager to see like if it's a tenant cause fee or HOA communication, does that come out of the tenant's pocket? And then how is something like that going to be regulated? That's really important to find out. So now a good management or property management company is going to want you to keep the property up, and they have a vested interest in wanting to be able to keep the same tenants. So they're also going to want good tenants in the property as well as work well with those tenants while they're there. And then when it comes to lease renewal, it might be very simple for them. Hopefully that person is still staying or they're well ahead of any changes that might need to come. And that also helps you as the property owner managing this property. So come the lease renewal time, even if that tenant is going to stay, typically you will see a lease renewal fee. And that's, in my opinion, the way I look at it is pat on the back to the property manager for doing a great job, keeping a good tenant in the property, and they do charge a fee for that. But that also is covering them being able to look over the lease, make any changes that are needed. If there are more laws or requirements or anything like that need to be taken into account, they are also taking their expertise and applying it to your lease, and that's all on your behalf. So that'll be included in the lease fee as well, or the renewal fee, as well as just making sure that it gets signed, everything is proper, and that you're doing what's needed legally. So now let's say if that person, tenant, decides to move out for whatever reason, and the in between period of getting another tenant in the property, you might have to make some decisions as far as the utilities to get it out of the old tenant's name. And the property manager might be able to help with the process for the utility transfer. You'll have to check with them to see if they charge a fee for that. Now, you could start to feel like a lot of the fees could add up. Maybe it's good to prepare, I would say, write it down and get a list together so that you also negotiate anything that you feel maybe, hey, this doesn't work for us. Is there any wiggle room on that? And that might be one of the areas, but oftentimes they will charge a utility transfer fee. So just be aware of that as well and ask about it if you hadn't heard that from your own property. So now once that property is vacant, what you want to make sure of is, does your property management company charge a vacancy fee, which is still a fee that they're going to charge even though you're not collecting any rent to cover what they might consider any administrative costs to still be managing that property on your behalf. So you want to check and see if they have a vacancy fee, and if so, how much is that? Now, obviously, if you're looking at and comparing or talking to a couple of property managers, at least two to three is what I would suggest. You'll be able to see across the three of those or the two of those exactly how do their fees differ. So one charges a vacancy and one doesn't, and all else is created equal. Maybe you're going with the one that has fewer fees. So you have that vacancy fee. And something that might surprise some owners is the fact that once that property is vacant and they get another tenant in the property, you do have that tenant placement fee again, which is going to be a percentage of that first month's rent. Remember, we spoke about that, and that was about 50% to 100% of the first month's rent. So you don't want to be surprised by that. You want to be prepared ahead of time to know, hey, I'm not going to get the same amount of rent for that particular month. And that's really important, especially if there's still a mortgage or any type of loan on that property and you still need to pay that bill. So what about when the tenant hasn't been paying? So typically set up in the process is going to be a late fee. Like if they're late on their rent, there is a late fee that'll be charged. Now that's negotiable in terms of how much that might be, but the property manager might have an additional fee that they charge. And just know that they typically have it set up in their system where they will not take any form of any payment that does not include the full rent and any applicable fees that the tenant is supposed to pay. So that's really important to be able to talk to your property manager about, because remember, you do want the tenant to pay any fees that are outstanding, but you also are trying to balance that with the fact that you're trying to pay whatever mortgage or anything on that property. And that's why having an emergency fund for each property is something that is very crucial to the process. So you can make sure that if there are any hiccups, it doesn't negatively impact you too much or throw your own personal finances out of order. So now if someone doesn't pay and there has to be an eviction process, you want to talk to the property manager about how that's handled. Because typically they will charge a fee for handling the eviction process for you. They'll follow with the court. They'll see it through to the end, coordinate with any attorney if needed. So now if it's an uncontested eviction, there's typically that means that the tenant is going along with everything. They're not going against it. There's no reason to get attorney involved. They typically will charge one particular fee for that process, and then any associated legal fees or court fees rather that come up, that usually is passed on to the owner. So you want to have a good understanding of, in your area where this property is, what would that look like if something like that came up. Now, if they have to get a lawyer involved and coordinate with an attorney, typically they're going to charge a higher fee for that. And then still, the attorney is going to have their own fees. So sometimes what you might work out is, you know what, in order to save myself in terms of how much I might have to spend, get an attorney involved, perhaps you work with your property manager. You decide we might have this renter just pay the rent that's due and then go ahead and you can leave the property. And that way it doesn't go on your report in terms of having to have an eviction, but also we just get you out of the property amicably. So that's something that you want to have a good relationship or rapport that you build with your property manager so you guys can work together on situations like that. But I recommend talking with them about that ahead of time so that it's not a complete surprise and you don't know how they typically would handle something or what fees would be associated. Now, those are some things to think about when it comes to the owner paid fees that a property manager might charge. In the next video, we'll go over fees that a tenant might be charged by the property manager and just talk through different things to consider with regards to that. But as far as the owner paid fees, don't forget that there are opportunities typically to be able to negotiate. So you want to talk about that markup fee for any maintenance requests. Do they have any in-house teams or repair teams that they might be able to utilize? They might be able to utilize. Could you actually use your own repair team that maybe was a bit cheaper? Or are there some things that you could come in and do yourself? And then how would they handle those? How might the fees change? So never just feel like you're stuck to exactly what the terms of the contract are. It's very great when you have a property manager that is thorough and following up. And there are different ranges of service. Some are full service, some handle only certain things. You want to be careful about only going with the one that's least expensive just because of cost, because the service really does matter. So if you can get a referral, that will be a great place to get started in terms of looking for a property manager and making a decision from there. But all in all, make sure you read through your contract ahead of time, ask all your questions, jot them down, use questions from this video, and just be as prepared as possible before signing a contract so you know that what you're getting into. And you can be in a position to really sit back and just set it and forget it in a way because you're still the business owner, but allowing someone to help you run your business and you can take some of that off of your own plate.